so we're going to shift gears a little bit, and instinctively driven primitive behavioral response patterns, hardwired stuff in us mammals, and it's been selected to ensure survival, simply meaning, if you believe in the theory of natural selection, over the eons, the development of particular physiology led in the direction of better ability to stay alive in a dangerous environment. So the fight, flight, or freeze responses are well known. Everybody certainly has heard about that. But let me talk for a minute or two about freeze responses, because there are different kinds of freeze responses, okay? Now, the first has sometimes been referred to as freeze with limbic alert. Okay, here's the story. I always like to use the example of a gazelle. You'll hear me talk about that over and over again. It's because I used to watch Wild Kingdom every Sunday, and they always had gazelles on there. So anyhow, let's say that you have a gazelle, and it's just, hanging out with its friends and eating some grass, kind of just kicking back a little bit. And all of a sudden, they see the silhouette of a lion on the hill, and they freeze. Okay, they're frozen. Now, the theory is, and I think it's pretty well supported, that freeze response is highly adaptive because predators typically home in on movement. So if you're a gazelle or any other kind of prey, if you freeze, there's a pretty good chance that the lion won't see you, and then once it goes away, then you can kind of go back to your daily routine. However, this kind of freeze response, on the one hand, they are motorically frozen; they're not moving. Okay. On the other hand, if you look at what's going on metabolically inside of these animals, they're having a fight or flight response, rapid heart rate, rapid breathing, and so on and so forth. They are riveted to what's going on. They have hypervigilance. So it's like a fight or flight response with a lid put on it. And later we're going to take a look at what that's all about, certain parts of the nervous system, the capability to kind of override and hold somebody or some animal still in order for them to survive. Now, if the animal starts coming towards the gazelle and enters what they call the flight zone, all bets are off and they're out of there, okay? And that's for typical fight or flight response. The next kind of freeze response is no escape freeze responses. And let me give you a perfect example of this. Would be possums. Plain possum, what they do is they actually develop very, very low blood pressure when there's a predator, and they just pass out. And the animal behaviorists say, makes good sense to us, because most animals that are out trying to catch a squirrel or possum or something to eat will not eat a dead animal. Now, there are certain animals that thrive on carrion and that kind of stuff, but this could be a coyote or something. If that animal is hardly breathing and is completely still, then they'll conclude it's dead and they'll go away. So it's highly adaptive in certain situations. Okay. Blood loss. Okay. Now let's think about this from the perspective of our early caveman or hominid, whatever. And let's say this guy is out and he starts being chased by a lion, and it just terrified, and he narrowly escapes. He climbs up in a tree. Oh, thank goodness, I got away from that lion, and the lion can't climb up there, so he's going to live to face another day. But as he was running across the prairie trying to get to this tree, he stepped on all kinds of rocks, and he's broken open a really significant artery in his foot. Okay, now when people see themselves bleed, a lot of times it scares them. Okay, so if you had a fight, look down and you're kind of pumping out blood out the bottom of your foot, if you had a sympathetic nervous system response, oh my God, it actually would increase blood pressure, increase heart rate, and what would happen? It'd bleed out more. So something that's adaptive, once you're in safety and you see blood pumping out of your body, is to pass out. And of course, many people experience something like this when they get their blood drawn. Okay, but it's adaptive. Your blood pressure goes way down, and so it allows better chance for the blood to coagulate and not have the person bleed out. So again, in terms of survival and that sort of thing, it makes good sense. And then finally is parasympathetic rebound. And as we know, in true fight or flight responses, it's really the sympathetic nervous system that gets activated, and it's during times of quiescence and when people are relaxed and they're not afraid. The parasympathetic nervous system comes on board and kind of facilitates relaxation and more easy to digest your food, and it fortifies the immune system and so forth. So when sometimes animals, and this also can happen with people as well, they have a sympathetic response. Something really, really scary happens, but let's say they get away. They almost died, but they didn't. Then what will happen sometimes is, as there is self-regulation, the sympathetic is coming down, the parasympathetic is coming on board. They start to calm down. And you can see it, metabolically, behaviorally. But sometimes there is a rebound, and you'll have a surge of parasympathetic activity, and their blood pressure will drop, and they'll faint. And so this is what you can see sometimes with people who are terribly frightened by a really traumatic event, but once it's over with, instead of just calming down, they actually will faint then, not so much during the scary event itself. So these are different kinds of freeze responses. Now, one of the biggest problems, we're going to talk more about this when we get into anxiety disorders. One of the biggest problems is that, except for some of these freeze responses that we talked about in nature, animals and early humans, when they are confronted by something dangerous, one thing they did with fight or flight responses is they used a lot of muscles and energy to get out of there or to fight for their life, that sort of thing. They became very, very active, and there are changes in blood chemistry. We'll talk more about this later, that prepare us people and other mammals to take action, to save our life. But it involves things like fighting with somebody or running away or what have you. So there's an immediate metabolic need for that. However, the majority of people, they have anxiety disorders, and these can be people that have panic attacks, for instance, panic disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, and really could be seen with almost any of the anxiety disorders. Almost always they freeze. A perfect example, someone has a panic attack, and by definition panic attacks have this rapid escalation of metabolic activity, a person incredibly anxious, and it reaches full intensity in 10 minutes or less, and then starts to go away. And by definition, that's panic attack. But a lot of panic attacks, that happens in 3 minutes. Okay, it's horrific, huge escalation of anxiety, and then starts to go away. But what will happen almost always, somebody has a panic attack, they'll freeze. And yet, one of the best things to do if you have a panic attack is to run. It actually is stimulating, I guess, what probably happens in nature. There's a direct metabolic need for that, a way to deal with the changes in blood chemistry, and people can oftentimes really settle themselves down if they engage in some intense activity, even for 10 minutes or so. Now, we'll get more specific later about that. That's just sort of a glimpse at that. There are 2 other hardwired responses in all us mammals: conservation, withdrawal, and this is the best example where you see this is in monkeys and apes. And if they experience the loss of their mother or of a sibling, these monkeys and apes get very, very attached. And you can see what looks like grief responses, if their mom dies, for instance. And we'll get to details later, but conservation withdrawal is shutting down. It's kind of the opposite of fight or flight, becoming very, very quiet, psychomotor retardation, not moving, not eating anything for a while. And we'll get to the details of that later. And then finally is tend and befriend. And this is something that is seen almost universally to be more active in females than males. And we'll look at the sort of the hormonal reasons for that a little bit later on. But this is a tendency. Let's just say, let's take a fox or something like that, and something is going to attack it. The guys are more likely to say, "I'm out of here," and take off. But females are more likely to put their life on the line to save their offspring. Okay, I mean, us guys wish we could do it, but we don't have the hormonal equipment to pull off these good tend to befriend responses. Now, keep in mind also, females are perfectly capable of having their own fight or flight response, but they have this extra dimension here that really operates to save their kids.